Hey guys, what you just saw there was a combination of new mechanics, polished boss fights, and updated level design added in the last year of development. My name is Joey, and I'm the creator of Chiaroscuro. If you're not familiar with the game, Chiaroscuro is a 2D adventure platformer with metroidvania elements. In a world where 95% of the population has suddenly forgotten pieces of their past, take the role of Rose, a mysterious amnesiac, and go on an adventure to seek out the lights, magical objects that have been rumored to restore the memories of those who find them. In October 2020, Chiaroscuro was successfully funded on Kickstarter, so today I want to give you guys a brief history of the project and explain what's changed in Chiaroscuro since the campaign's success. So to start, here's a little bit you should know about me. I'm 21 years old, I'm a full-time college student studying digital media, and I've been working on Chiaroscuro for almost 2 years now. While I specialize in 2D design, most of these skills we learn in our college classes focus more on 3D game design. I grew up playing games like Cave Story, Hollow Knight, and Pokemon, which have massively influenced how I designed Chiaroscuro. The project began in January 2020 as a solo hobby project in Gamemaker Studio. However, after having an encouraging conversation with my game design professor, I realized I wanted to work on the game full time. I spent the summer of 2020 designing a public demo for people to play, and once I released it on Steam, Chiaroscuro received a massive amount of reception and feedback that encouraged me to seek out a means of funding for the game by launching a Kickstarter campaign. It's been a little over a year since the Chiaroscuro community helped me get the project funded, and since then, not only have I created my game studio, but I've also made a plethora of changes to the game to improve its pacing, uniqueness, artistic style, and accessibility based on community feedback from the demo. As a result, this new version of the game looks and feels like a completely different game, and I'm excited to show you guys how far Chiaroscuro has come ever since the demo's initial inception. So without further ado, let's get into this. Let's go back to December of 2020. One complaint a few people had in the demo was the inconsistency of the blade swinging. I made a few changes to this item as a whole, and now the new combat system feels 10 times more fluid. Firstly, I sped up the swinging pace so that players could get faster DPS without sacrificing much of their time. I realized that having the player pause their movement mid-attack somewhat threw off the game's pacing, and that speeding up that swing fixed this issue. To allow players to keep their distance from certain enemies, I paid careful attention when adding knockback to the game. While unfortunately this forced me to re-script every boss and enemy in Chiaroscuro, this change was ultimately for the better. The knockback mechanic doesn't take away from being paused while attacking, the quicken swing enables the player to react faster, and I also added in an input buffer, so you don't need to time your swings anymore. Another quality of life addition is that swinging on the ground will now nudge you in the direction you want to go, though attacking in the air still works the same as always. The last few changes I made to the combat system involved adding a way to cancel attacks with a jump and a dash, and I also changed the blade's name to the Thorn to match Rose's design. After reworking the combat system, I realized the game's current healing mechanics did not match up with the pace of the new fast-paced Thorn attacks that she had. In the game's initial demo, your health would only restore if your lumen was at least half full. This feature inadvertently forced players to limit how much they dash to heal up. To account for this, while I slowed down the regeneration speed by a lot, I never actually got rid of it. Since the new combat had changed the game's initial pacing, I decided to add item hotkeys for a method of quick healing. In the demo, enemies would drop hearts on death that the player could collect to heal up. Now, enemies drop health jars, which can be picked up and used on command. Throwing the jar will pause the player momentarily while still maintaining their direction. This feature supports the faster pace of the game by allowing a limited number of times to quick heal during boss fights, while also offering the option to wait until your health has regenerated if you manage to be evasive. It's a fair mechanic, and it rewards you for your skill by allowing you to choose when to heal on command. It's the best of both worlds. Plus, there are two other kinds of items as well, the lumen and strength jars. One will fill your lumen bar, and the other will temporarily increase your thorn damage. One of the most significant issues that Chiaroscuro faced post the demo was its lack of proper menu design. As a result, I knew if I wanted to take this game in a different direction, I would need to make a few massive changes. I ended up scrapping my old main menu, pause menu, and item menu code in favor of something more polished. I ended up spending months adding features like custom keyboard bindings, a brightness slider, multiple save files, audio sliders, and many more attributes that make a game a game. Part of the reason I did this too was that initially, Chiaroscuro was hard-coded to my PC specs, meaning that if I hadn't managed to do these changes early on, it would have made refining and polishing later on way more challenging and way more time-consuming. Once I had reworked the game's main menu and pause menu, it was time to update its item menu. I added in health jars, item slots, descriptions, and even an entire element menu describing different abilities Rose can execute. Rose can switch her elements when holding the element trigger button and pressing L or R. As of now, only a handful of these elemental abilities are coded into the game. However, rest assured that they are all diligently planned out and ready to be added once I get the time. After successfully designing the item menu, I felt like I was on a roll. Firstly, I polished the player's heads-up display and added an element system to its right-hand side. Then, I reached the dialogue system, which definitely still has a few issues. I had a much harder time implementing this than the previous systems. After that, I realized that I became a little less confident in my programming abilities and I had a slight burnout period. Around the middle of March, college classes were getting a bit rough and the game's development was getting repetitive. I realized I needed a break from UI, period. And that's when I started adding water mechanics. For the most part, adding water was fine. It was a mix of animating and shaders work, which made it a massive trial and error process because I'm mediocre at both. In addition, the water still needs a bit of optimization, like the dialogue system. Unfortunately, I experienced a bug that I just had such a hard time fixing that I ended up taking a break from designing the water entirely and moved on to something else. I needed to switch to something new, something that was integral to development but still allowed me to take a break from menu design and shaders as well, and so I decided to start adding in new elemental abilities. The first one I added was the double jump with the wind element. When Rose double jumps, she temporarily changes elements and launches herself higher in the air. Then, I added in Flight, an ability unlocked through obtaining the plasma element, which lets you temporarily stay airborne. Lastly, I added a passive flashbang ability using an item called the Radiant, which the players can use to stun enemies in their tracks. Finally, these new mechanics were easy to implement, and I managed to put them into the game first try. My confidence in the development of the game was growing, and I realized then what was causing my burnouts: frustration. Whenever I was frustrated that a part of my game wouldn't work, I'd lose confidence in what I was making, and it would cause me to second guess myself. I knew that if I was going to tackle a project of this scale, I needed to organize the development timeline in such a way to where I don't get burnt out. I made a goal to swap between different roles of my project every few months. That way, if something works and something doesn't, I will always have another task I can balance to without losing confidence in my design abilities. I have been applying this practice since June 2021, and it's all gone uphill from here. I went back to the roots of it all. What is my favorite part of game development? What kind of games inspired me as a kid? Games with a deep and rich story matched with a fascinating world. I took a month's break from programming to focus on the writing and lore, finalizing the ending I wanted for the game. I also took the time to begin working in Master Plan, a project manager that helps me maintain Chiaroscuro's scope from a bird's eye view. I conceptualized all of the areas in the game, including fleshing out 80% of the level design concepts. I made a to-do list, organized my projects for the next few months. I had a plan. When school started back up in August, I knew that if I didn't want to get burnt out, I'd need to work on something fun. That fun came in the form of designing boss fights. I spent this last semester optimizing every one of the bosses in the initial alpha, including their scripts, animations, and behavior. In addition, I organized an independent study in which I got the opportunity to consult with a 2D design professor to get input about the game's ever-growing art style. My mentor helped me realize that I could still add shading to the game through midtones, which I just had to be selective about what was considered light and shadow, though I guess that's just the use of chiaroscuro in art. In October 2021, or during the last Kickstarter update, I began to dip my foot in designing more late-game locations, and Storm Island is where all of this started. I knew I wanted to get these assets out of the way anyways, so beginning Storm Island as an in-between project was a lot of fun. I got to practice level design, concept art, animation, all while designing a new area for the game to show off to the community. The levels I created that month were extremely fun to play, which encouraged me to take a second look at the earlier levels I had designed for the game. After polishing up several of Chiaroscuro's bosses in the first alpha and cleaning up the color palette, I decided to give my game another playthrough. However, something that bothered me was that the current levels did not fit in with the levels I had designed a year and a half ago. While one of the reasons for this was me becoming a better designer, I realized the main issue at hand while running through each level individually. I had designed these levels as an artist, not as a level designer. As a result, these levels looked pretty from afar, though I never went to see if these jumps truly matched the game's pace. Many of the jumps were too far or too short, and the world didn't feel alive because before the initial demo, I didn't expect the game to grow into what it became. Unfortunately, I didn't plan ahead for these levels, and instead, I was just designing what looked nice because it was my first game and I was screwing around at the start of the project. As a result, this ultimately came back to haunt me. After that, I spent the next 2 months organizing a plan for every room in the game, building a concrete and interconnected map design, completely reworking 60% of the alpha's initial levels, and constructing spreadsheet after spreadsheet to keep the project organized and consistent. I have spreadsheets for enemies, collectibles, cutscenes, levels, lore, characters, their relationships, and more. The list goes on and on. If I showed you guys what my bookmark folder full of spreadsheets looked like, you'd think it was a table of contents for the Lord of the Rings book. The point is, the project is 10 times more organized than it was when I first started. Everything's set in stone. I've taken 1 or 2 late game areas out of Chiaroscuro in favor of adding them post-release in DLCs to account for scope creep. I've redesigned several area backdrops and made a plan for the future of the game following 2022, and that's where we get to December of 2021. I spent most of this month sprucing up my studio's marketing, including making a website for the game, tidying up the Chiaroscuro Steam page, updating the press kit, and, as you saw at the start of this video, working on the game's teaser trailer. The obvious question now is, what comes next for Chiaroscuro? Well, if you haven't been able to already infer through the current state of the game's development, unfortunately, Chiaroscuro will likely not be releasing in 2022. And that being said, I'm also going to set the release date for now as to be decided. After a year of balancing Chiaroscuro's development with my college classes, in addition to this being my first game and entrepreneurial experience, I've had to overcome several challenges that often appear for solo developers. Struggles in managing time, getting burnt out, and slacking on consistent marketing are just a few of these challenges to mention. However, these struggles are, in turn, heavily impacted by the immense work that goes into designing a game independently. That amount of effort cannot be understated, and practicing it on my own has been an exceptionally eye-opening experience. As a result, I have a much higher respect for anybody working in the production industry or project management. And in any medium, if you find yourself working independently, try and discover and learn more about your workflow. Figure out your work ethics and find ways to counter burnout whenever it arises, and you'll be on a good setup. Now that I've had time to learn the ropes of large-scale project management, I feel more confident than ever in pursuing the project's development moving forward. This next semester, I plan to focus on level, character, and cutscene design, so those Kickstarter backers who are helping me design a character for the game, you will likely be hearing from me again this spring to polish things up on their designs. Thankfully, after the semester of college, I will be graduating. That way, I won't have to balance those 2 insanely time-consuming endeavors. By the summer, I'd like to have a new alpha version available for my special thanks people in the Discord. And hopefully, by late summer or early fall of 2022, I can release a new and updated demo for the public to see how the game has changed for themselves. This new demo will contain story content and showcase the first 20 to 30 minutes of the game, rather than an unrelated platforming demo. In addition, this updated version will have the new combat and healing mechanics, updated UI, menus, and custom controls. If you're interested in hearing about this when it releases, either join the community Discord, follow me on Twitter, or join the email list, which can be found in my website linked below. I hope you all enjoyed this recap of the game's production over the last year. If you're interested in learning more about Chiaroscuro or keeping up with developments, check out the game's website and wishlist it on Steam. The game will be coming for Windows and Mac, and you can find all of that information linked below as well. I plan to create more long-form video content in the future, so if you enjoyed this extended dev vlog, consider subscribing to the channel. Take care guys, BlackberryKin signing off.